Hi everyone, in today's video I'm just going to be answering a question I got from Pauline. Pauline messaged me via my website saying that she had been watching my videos and she'd found them very helpful, and that she thinks through the videos she'd got to grips with using the ScanNCut, which, you know, warms my heart, that really does. So thank you, Pauline, for telling me that. But then she went on to say that there was one thing that had been puzzling her. She had been trying to make a shaped card using some basic shapes that she'd welded together. And when she'd got the finished result that she wanted, she decided she wanted to make a slightly smaller layer to sit on top of the base card that would have an even border all the way around. The way that she did it was she selected her original shape, and using the edit icons, she adjusted the size down. I assume she means she made a duplicate, and she adjusted the duplicate size down ever so slightly, keeping the maintain aspect ratio on. And then when she layered the two pieces together, there wasn't an even border all the way around. So she went on to say she guesses that she could do it using the offset, using the inward, and doing it that way comes out right. And she wanted to know if I could offer any explanation. So that's today's video. So basically, I think I did cover this, but probably right way back in the beginning when the ScanNCut first came out and provided us with like an offset function. But obviously I've been doing some recap videos on the channel over recent months, and I will be going forward. So I just thought it would be a good opportunity to do a recap video and try and explain. I think the simple answer is, I think it's something to do with symmetry. I'm not actually clever enough to give you a proper explanation, but I can show you using shapes in Canvas Workspace, and that hopefully will help you understand. So what I would say is she didn't tell me what shapes she had been using, so I'm just going to use some random shapes, but I'm hopefully going to try and explain. So I'm in Canvas Workspace for computer, often referred to as the downloadable version, or some people call it the offline version. You'll know you're in the download version because A, you've got to access it through an icon on your computer, and it will look like this when you see it on screen, and there's no big purple download button over on the left here like there would be if you were using it online, or obviously, or the version that you would access through a web browser. Now I'm only using the computer-based or downloadable version because I've been doing some work in Canvas Workspace today and I've been using the downloadable version. So while I've got it open, I thought I would just give an explanation to Pauline in the hope that it will help. So I'm going to come over to the basic shapes, and I'm just going to choose a square. By default, these come in at 3.94 by 3.94 if you're using inches. Just so that this doesn't take up a whole lot of space on my canvas here, I'm going to take this down to 2 inches, making sure I've got maintain aspect ratio on. That way it will keep it as a square, so it's 2 inches wide by 2 inches high. Then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate it twice. So I've got 3 squares that are all 2 inches by 2 inches. So this first one, I'm just going to come up to the line colour at the top, and I'm just going to make it red, just in the hope that you'll see it better. And this one on the far right, I'm going to make blue. So I've got a black square, a red square and a blue square, and they're all 2 inches square. So let's assume this was Pauline's base card. She wanted to make an inward layer by using the measurements over here. If I want to make this red square 1/2 inch smaller than the black square, I've got to make this 1.5, leaving aspect ratio maintained, and hit enter, and that gives me a square of 1.5 by 1.5. If I wanted to make it bigger, say half an inch bigger, I would come over here to the width and I would type 2.5, and because it's symmetrical and I've got maintain aspect ratio selected, it's made it 2.5. So I've got a 2-inch square, a 1.5 inch square, and a 2.5 inch square. And if I put all these three together and select them and center them evenly on the horizontal and vertical, you will see that they all nest and that the red square is half an inch in total smaller than the bigger one, and the blue one is half an inch in total bigger than the black one. And if you do that using the offset, you will get exactly the same results. So let's just put them separate again as they were. I'm going to duplicate the first one, the black one, and I'm going to come down to offset, and I'm going to choose an inward offset. I'm going to say bevel because I'm using a square and it's got angular corners. Now you've got to remember, when you're using the offset applies whatever measurement you put here in the spacing to the top and the bottom. So if I want an inward offset that's half an inch total smaller than this 2-inch square, so in other words 1.5 inches like this, I've got to use a 1/4 inch spacing. So I do 0.25 inward, say OK, and that's now given me, if we go to, let me change it to red so it matches the one above, and let's go back up on the editing, you can see it's 1.5 inches square because the spacing is a 1/4 inch from the top and a 1/4 inch from the bottom, and the same on either side. Okay, so again, if I want to do an offset and make it bigger, I'll select my original one, 2 inches, I'll come down to offset, I'll leave it at a 1/4 inch spacing, and I'll say outward and say OK. And now I've got the equivalent of this one, which is 2.5 inches, and so is this. Okay, so when you're using the inward and outward, whatever the total size you want your item to be, either bigger or smaller, you halve that measurement and put that in the spacing. So far we've got the same result, and they would nest. So that makes me think that the shapes that Pauline had welded together, because she said she'd used 2 shapes, I think. Let me just go back to her message. Yeah, I have made a shape card at the moment, which I've created by welding some basic shapes together. So in other words, more than one shape. And I'm guessing now that the shapes that she's welded together are not symmetrical. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to bring a square on, and I'm just going to make it 2 inches. So I've got room on my page. And then I'm going to bring a circle on, and I'll just make that 2 inches for now. Okay, so I'm going to put the circle on top of the square. I'm going to center them to each other, and I'm going to weld them. So over here on the right hand side now, you'll see that this is 3.30 wide and 2 inches high. Just to make this easier to understand, I'm just going to untick maintain aspect ratio, and I'm going to make this 3.5 just to keep it in kind of even measurements for me. So it's 3.5 inches wide and 2 inches high. And now I'm going to tick maintain aspect ratio. From what she said, I'm guessing if this was her base card, she made a duplicate. So we've got 2 shapes that are exactly the same size. And she says in the message that she made, or she was trying to make an inlay of her shape that would fit inside her original shape with an even border all the way around. Okay, so using what I've just shown you up here by selecting a shape and then making it say half an inch smaller, if I now select this shape and I come to the width and I make it 3 inches instead of 3.5, and say enter, you'll see straight away that the height is not half an inch smaller than this. You would think that maybe it would be 3, this would be 3 by 1.5, and it's 3 by 1.7. So if I make this red and position it on here and select them both and center it on the horizontal and the vertical, it's not even. You'll see that the border here and here on the top is not even all the way around. And I'm guessing that's what she did. So if we choose the original shape and make a duplicate and come down here and we use the offset button, and let's say we want an inward offset at half an inch smaller, so we know we've got to use 0.25. I've got angles and curves, so I'm going to leave it on bevel, but if you're using something that's very rounded, you could change it to rounded. I'm just going to leave it on bevel and I'm going to say OK. So now this shape here is 3 by 1.5 and the original was 3.5 by 2. So it's exactly half an inch smaller. You can see we've got an even border all the way around. So I think the answer is that she's not using anything symmetrical. So let's go back to our basic shapes and let's grab a shape that is different than a square or a circle and see what we get. So now I've brought this one on. Now if you look at the size of it, it's 3.94 by 3.94. So I'm going to take it down to 2 inches and say enter. And when I took it to 2 inches, the height remained at 2 inches. But what it's doing, it's measuring at its widest point. So from here to here, it's 2 inches. And from side to side, it's 2 inches. So if I make a duplicate of that and make it red so you can see it, and I come over here and in the width I type 1.5, it will still make it 1.5 in height, but when I put the two together and select them and center them equally on the horizontal and vertical, you'll see I've not got an even border along the top and bottom, which is the same as the even border I've got on the left and the right. If I chose this 2 inch shape and used the offset and said, give me an inward border that is a total of half an inch smaller, so I have to use the 0.25, which is a 1/4 inch spacing, it will give me this. And you can see I've got that same even border all the way around. So I'm hoping that that makes sense. I think, as I say, it's something to do with what you're using being symmetrical all the way round. So a square is the same on all 4 sides. This shape here, although it's 2 inches by 2 inches, it's not 2 inches in the middle. The 2 inch by 2 inches is being measured by its highest or widest point. And just going back to the original welded shape that I showed you here, and I said, you know, she was trying to make her inlay slightly smaller. Let me create another duplicate. You can see this is 3.5 by 2. This one I made 3 on the width and it took the height down to 1.71. If I alter this one to be half an inch smaller on the height instead of the width, so if I take this down to 1.5 on the height, the width becomes 2.3. So this one I made 3 inches wide, which made the height 1.7. This one, I took the height down by the half an inch, which takes it down to 1.5, which makes it 2.63. So you can see they're not the same size, even though these two shapes are half an inch smaller than the black one. Does that make sense? So this is 3.5 wide, this is 3, this is 2 inches high, this is only 1.71. but on the 2-inch high, if I made it 1.5 high, it makes it 2.63. I don't know if that helps, but basically, if you want an even border all the way around and your shape that you're starting off with is not completely symmetrical and evenly sized on all its 4 sides, then you have to use the offset and do an inward or an outward offset. So have a play with it yourself and see if you can, you know, work it out and understand. But I think you'll find, unless you're working with something like a square or a circle, doing it by just changing the width and height here won't work. Okay? So please give the video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.